So Matt Alldredge is a carnivore researcher. He's been working on this Front Range mountain lion study for 10 years. Over or just about 100 animals have been handled. And we here in Boulder are kind of at the heart of the study. So the study area is going north to Lyons and south to Jefferson County. And so we're sitting here kind of in the middle of this research area. And it's just a unique opportunity for a study of this scale with our local animals. So welcome, thanks to Matt, and without further ado, I'll bring Matt Alldredge to the stage, Colorado Parks and Wildlife researcher. Thank you, Matt.
How I know nobody's heard me talk before? The room's full. So just to start, I actually got an engineering degree from CU. Long time ago. So I just had to throw that out there. And then starting in the early 2000s, our agency started having to deal with a lot more lion calls. Our officers were being called out all the time because there was a lion in somebody's yard or killed a pet or something. So as that kept ramping up, our agency decided that we needed to do a mountain lion study to study the human interaction, what lions are doing in these urban areas. And so that's why I was hired. And so for the first 6 months, we tried to figure out where to do it. And we finally figured that Boulder was right at the heart of it. And then we needed a good-sized study area, so we actually ended up from Lyons all the way down into Evergreen. But Boulder was always the main focus. A lot of cats were caught here, a lot of human interactions here. I've got to acknowledge all the support from Boulder County, Boulder City, Jefferson County, our agency. It wasn't just me. It was a lot of people, a lot of technicians involved with this. Where we sit right now, we've got right around 20 publications that have come out of this research. 6 graduate students have actually been funded by us or the counties and have gotten their either master's or PhD off of this project. So it's been pretty productive, and I'm going to just hit the high points. Obviously, I can't get into too much detail with 10 years of work, but I think I'll hit the high points. If there's something you want more information on, it'd be great if we can hold most of the questions at the end, but if it just isn't making sense, go ahead and yell at me. If you're in the hall standing, you might be able to stand behind, oh, no, it's full. You can sit on the floor at my feet, I guess. There's a little bit of room back here if you want to sit back here behind the stage. First, I thought I'd lay the groundwork of the history of lions. So, believe it or not, other than humans, lions is the most widely distributed mammal in North America and all the way down into South America. So you can see the orange and the red up there. That's their historic distribution. And then that red is kind of where they've been reduced to now. Look at the management history. I always like to go back to the the books I used to read to my kids. You can look at where the red fern grows. Does anybody remember what they called the cat in there, the mountain lion? They also referred to it as the devil cat. So that gets into the history of cats. They used to be bountied, unbountied, unclassified. It wasn't until 1965 where Colorado actually protected them and started managing them. So it's reasonable to assume that prior to that, cat numbers were pretty low. And so all the research that's been done since then on deer and elk and everything else has been during this time when these lion populations were probably growing, and I would venture to guess that somewhere in the 2000s is where they kind of stabilized, especially in this area where they're not hunted very much. So the long-term objectives. We wanted to understand how cougars are using the urban, ex-urban habitats in the Front Range of Colorado. So I'll get into that quite a bit, and I think I can shed a lot of light on that one. We also wanted to assess aversive conditioning, and I'm going to hit that right off the bat. So we wanted to figure out a way if a cat was in the area, in town, doing something that we didn't want it to do, our officers are getting called out in the middle of the night to deal with a cat. We wanted to figure out something that maybe we could do to discourage that behavior. The idea being maybe cats are habituated to this urban environment and we need to change that behavior. Slap their hand, maybe they won't reach into the cookie jar anymore. We also wanted to get a whole bunch of basic information, demographic, movement patterns, habitat use, predator-prey interactions, which turned out to be a big one for us. One question that everybody gets when they work with lions, how many lions are there? Does anybody know? 43. Right? We'll get into that. We did a little bit with relocation. You know, if a cat's causing a problem in town, what happens if you move it outside of town? Does it come back? What if you move it a little bit farther? So I'll talk about that briefly, and that should do it. So we actually caught 102 independent cougars during this study. Those, obviously, over 10 years, we caught many of them several times. So we have over 300 captures of adult lions during this study. We also captured and ear-tagged a few cubs, and then we got into where we were more or less monitoring the cubs with trail cameras. We could see when the female would den up, and then we'd go put cameras out and count how many kittens, and we'd kind of monitor that over time. We had 56 mortalities. And this was kind of informative because, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of hunting pressure in this area. You can't hunt it with traditional methods because there's so much private property. You can't use dogs, and that's the most effective way to hunt lions. So there's not a lot of hunting mortality. Roadkill was huge. Who in this room's seen a lion? Of course, we're in Boulder. Everybody's seen a lion. If I ask this question somewhere else, nobody's seen a lion. So roadkill was surprising, right? It's not like deer and they're standing alongside the road. So that was a little surprising to me. The human interaction wasn't. This is either the landowner has a lion in their yard, they feel threatened and they kill it, or the lion's done something and our agency has had to come in and kill it. We did have 7 hunting. Most of those occurred in 2 years. We had 6 unknown mortalities. We had 4 interspecific mortalities where one lion killed another one. And if you read the literature, that's supposed to be the adult male kills a subadult male, right? Not in this case. That was the first mortality we had. That's actually the first lion we ever caught. Subadult male was killed by the second lion we ever caught, an adult male. Other than that, we had adult males kill adult females.
Where have the road kills been happening?
I'll get into that. I've got a figure showing that relative to human densities. This is of the ones we collared, yes, 56 mortalities of the ones we collared. So the 3 females that were killed, they were actually on a deer kill themselves, and the male came in and killed them over that kill. And then we had 4 natural mortalities. So what's a natural mortality for a lion? Old age? Yeah, maybe. It's usually when they're getting kicked by an animal when they're killing it. So they're going to kill an elk, and they get kicked by it, breaks a rib, punctures the intestines, get kicked in the head, and that ends up killing them. So hunting can be a risky thing, especially when you're a 100-pound female taking down a 500-pound elk. You know, it happens. So just some neat, cool stuff right off the bat. Look at dispersal. Everybody wants to know how far lions move. A lot of the lions we had in this study, they all moved north and south, which makes sense. That's the way our ridge lines go. So they're following the terrain features. A lot of them would go, say, Boulder to Horsetooth up by Fort Collins. That's a typical distance. We didn't have a lot of dispersal by females. Most of that was males. We had these 2. So that first one in orange was down by Evergreen. Took off one April, headed to Wyoming. I thought it was going to cut out and go up to Nebraska. Then it settled up by Douglas and Casper in there. Was there for a year and then was harvested by a hunter. And right after that happened, we had another lion take off, follow almost that same path, went to the same spot, established a home range, and there we go. This one's pretty cool. This was actually a kitten that its mother was killed on the road, and so that kitten went to rehab. Once it got big enough to actually forage on its own, we turned it loose. It headed east, made it to Kansas, slipped down through Kansas, it checked out Lamar down there. Then it slipped through Oklahoma, the corner of Texas, and settled in New Mexico. So these lions can move. Everybody heard about the lion that made it to Connecticut, right? That was, 5 years ago? I think it makes sense. I mean, lions are hardwired to disperse, and once they start dispersing, there's things to eat, but they don't see any other lions, so they keep going and going and going, looking for something that looks like them. That was pretty cool. Here's the other cool one. This was bizarre. So that blue one is an adult female that we caught on Hile Valley. And that yellow one was a subadult female. And at about the same time, they took off and headed to Canyon City, Pueblo, because it's really a garden spot to go to in the spring. So they parallel each other all the way down. And you can see there on the dates that within one day of each other, they both turned around and headed back. Somewhat typical for that subadult female, but an adult female taking off on that big walk out like that is really bizarre. We saw that behavior on a lot of the females. They'd make this big circle out and come back and pretty much settle in their mother's home range. So here's the question of the day. Do cougars use urban areas? I think we all just know that because everybody raised their hand when I asked if you saw one. So yes, they do. We can put these home ranges up, and these are just home ranges of a bunch of collared cats. And yeah, they overlap a lot of urban areas. But I put GPS collars on these cats. So we'd catch all these cats, and we'd put a GPS collar on them that would actually email me 8 locations a day. So 8 times a day we're getting locations. So now we can look at how much an individual lion uses these urban areas, when they're using it, are they all using it? And I'll get into the details more, but just looking at this, I know it's a bunch of colored dots right now, but I know what those dots are. Most of those are at night, 11, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. So when Boulder settles down and gets quiet, the cats start moving in and they start moving around. Most of it are the same cats. So there's not all these cats that are bumping up along the edge of Boulder actually are coming into town. It's just a handful. Most of them are adult females. A lot of this occurs in the spring, this time of year, April, May. Has everybody seen them in April and May? Now year round? So we'll dig into this and see if we can explain more of it. Before we go there, I'm going to go right into the cougar-human conflict because that was the focus of the study. So where does conflict occur? When does it occur? Who's doing it? You hear people think, well, it's the teenagers, which is weird to me because cats don't live that long. But it's the young subadults, right, that are causing the problems and the older ones learn. Or maybe the ones that cause problems are taken out before they get old. I mean, it's chicken and egg argument. Are cougars being habituated? Can we use aversive conditioning? And what are the management implications for this? So when we started this study in 2007, we had a lot of incidents in Boulder, including this one where a lion killed a deer and cached it behind somebody's vehicle, which would be really exciting to get up to. You might drop your coffee. As the study progressed, these incidents seemed to slow down a little bit. I don't know why. It could be that we weren't taking out as many cats and we were getting an older age structure in here, cats that have learned how to live there. It could just be random chance. I mean, this is just one case of a lion study. But it did seem like as the study progressed, our number of incidents in all the cities and urban areas was dropping. So we tried aversive conditioning, and no, we didn't shoot at the cat in the cage. But one of the techniques we wanted to test is rubber bullets or bean bags, and we'd let them go and shoot bean bags at them. Of course, we had to catch them first because they were usually in the city, and we couldn't do this in the city because we needed to catch them and collar them, and then we couldn't let them go in the city because we don't want a drugged cat running around with traffic. So this is the very first one that we tried, and he was, gosh, it's been too long since I've been in Boulder. El Dorado Canyon, killed sheep or goats there. We caught him, we shot beanbags at him, and for the next 3 months, that cat never returned to that area. I'm like, wow, we're onto something. After that, it didn't work quite so well. These cats would move on, and they'd cause trouble in other areas. They'd come back, they'd do the same thing over and over again. And so it wasn't really working. But if you think about this in terms of habituation, what are we teaching the cat? We catch them off a deer kill that happens to be in somebody's backyard. We move them out of town. We shoot beanbags at them. I think we taught them that people are really awful and they should run when they see us. But I don't know that that association with town or certain situations was coming through. So it was a hard thing to do. So after that, we ended up moving to just removing their kills. So when they'd come into town or in somebody's backyard, we'd move the kill. As soon as that cougar would come back and find that his kill was gone, they would start looking for something else to eat. But a lot of times that would actually encourage them to move on. They'd find a kill somewhere else. They'd go back out to open space where they should be. So sometimes it worked. If it happened to be a raccoon in somebody's yard, well, they'd kill the other raccoon up the tree the next night, so that wasn't as effective. So aversive conditioning was mixed, but I don't think these cats were really habituated to humans or anything like that. And we'll dig into that a little bit more. So incidents, we talked about this, somebody already asked this question. So we've got this by density. So less than 10 acres would be one house, one or more houses per 10 acres. And then we got more than 35 acres, 10 to 20 acres, 10 to 35 acres. So you can see there's not many on the aggressive, but more of them incurred in the higher densities. Food sources are livestock, more at the higher structure densities. Property damage, again, more in these more densely populated areas. And then sightings, kind of a mixed bag, but again, where there's lots of houses, more sightings. Kind of makes sense. And we can look at mortality in terms of harvest. So where, if people are hunting cats, where does that occur? Surprisingly, there's a bit in these higher human densities. So that's probably when somebody's got a cat problem and it's got a kill in their backyard and they get a license and shoot it there. And this is over like a 15-year period. Most of the harvest is occurring away from, where there's lower human densities or no structures at all. Roadkill was a little bit interesting. In these more developed areas, there's quite a few being killed, and then out in the really rural stuff, so up the canyons where people are going fast and they're crossing roads, they think it's safe. So kind of a mixed bag on that one. These medium density housing areas, there weren't nearly as many. So we can dig through this a little bit. Like I said, I had well over 500,000 data points on where cats occur. So we can build what's called a resource selection function. So what types of features, habitats, slopes, what are lions selecting for in this area? And you can see that's the green, that's where they're selecting. So here's the front range. So they're avoiding that and they're avoiding the higher elevations. So we can look at this, and cats like the lower density human areas. They like to stay away from roads, and they like canopy. They don't like to be away from canopy. They don't like the higher elevations. They don't like structures. Somebody said they should turn their phone off. That was me. So then we can use what lions are selecting for, and then we can look at overlapping sightings on that and see if lions are being sighted in proportion to the areas they're using, and they're not. So this is where lions are being sighted, right up along the edge, which was pretty much where lions were not selecting for in the previous slide. So we can see now that lions are being sighted, and that's way too small to read, but that should say in these less than, or at least one structure per 10 acres. That is, gosh, I wore my glasses so I could actually, wetness. We'll ignore wetness. Distance to structures. So they're being seen closer to structures now. Good Lord. 10 years ago when I started, I could actually read. Distance to road. So they're being seen close to roads, close to structures. They're being seen more in open areas, not in canopy. Remember, they selected for canopy on the other slide, but now they're being seen where there's less canopy. So that's telling us something about where these incidences are occurring. So we can actually look at conflict as well and see where the conflict is occurring. Conflict occurs, well, lo and behold, near structures, near roads. not so much in the canopy that they like. So it's occurring a positive effect in open areas and in these higher density areas. So it all kind of adds up. So we learned a lot from that. So can harvest be a management tool for that? So we can overlay harvest on top of this RSF as well. Well, this is where all the incidents were occurring and all the sightings were occurring. This is the area that they were selecting for. And now harvest is even occurring a little bit farther out. So it's kind of telling us that harvest is not going to be a population level tool that we can use in these urban areas, at least the way harvest currently occurs, to manage that. Going out and hunting a lion? Yeah. Yep. We also have all this GPS data, so we can look at how often cougars are in the area where there's a potential for conflict and no conflict is reported or doesn't occur. So I can look at my GPS locations and say, I know there was a lion in somebody's backyard, we never heard about it. Or I can say, I actually know this lion killed a deer in somebody's backyard and we never heard about it. Whether that's because they didn't want to report it or didn't know about it, it's another story. I've actually had people call me from payphones before because they wanted to report it, but they didn't want the lion hurt. So, you know, there's that side of the equation too. And then I can look at case histories. I've got all these lions, some of which were caught actually in the city limits or around it, so I can actually see what the history is, and it kind of gets at the habituation question, right? AF01 was the first female we ever caught. It was up Skunk Canyon. She was 1.5 years old. We got a lot of reports on her initially, and then she kind of learned the environment. We barely got any reports. Her first litter of kittens were in town all the time. After that, they were barely in town. She lived to be a ripe old age of 10 plus, and then passed away of old age. AM13, we caught up on Sugarloaf. It killed a llama, 1.5 years old. It was kind of out on Forest Service, kind of questionable if it was on private or not. We collared it, shot beanbags at it. I think it was like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it was up by Netherland and killed a miniature horse. And I'm getting this, all right, this is one we've got to take out because it's habituated to livestock, we got a problem. And I'm like, no, this is just random chance. And so we couldn't catch it because it was too smart, because they don't go back in a cage. So a 1.5 weeks after that, it comes down Boulder Canyon and kills an expensive colt. Now I'm eating crow, and I'm saying, all right, you know, maybe you've got a point, but we couldn't catch it. We've got a collar on it, but we couldn't catch it. It never did another thing for 3 years. It went up to Ohio Valley Ranch and got really, really big eating elk. Really big. It's the biggest lion we had in the study. Last time we caught it, it was 185 pounds at like 2.5, 3 years old, and that's big. It's not like me being 185 pounds. They're like muscular at 185 pounds. But it didn't do anything else. So was it habituated to livestock? I don't think so. I think it was opportunistic. It was a subadult that was wandering through the area, and it happened to run into a lot of livestock and then didn't do anything else. And then it killed a llama outside of lions, and that was the lady that called me from a payphone. And we still couldn't catch it. We finally caught it with dogs and got it in a tree and put a new collar on it on Ohio Valley. But it didn't do anything for several more years after that. And finally, I think it was probably 8 or 9 years old, it killed another llama and was taken out by aphis. But you can see the patterns of this. They're just case studies. We can't throw a bunch of statistics at it, but we can see that they're not really habituated. They're not repeating this over and over and over, but they're searching the environment and opportunistically taking livestock at times, and yes, pets at times. But by and large, they're selecting for deer and elk like we would like them to. What's that? Sorry, APHIS, Wildlife Services, the federal Wildlife Services took it out. So it's a federal agency that'll respond to animal damage. Yeah. It was trapped and killed. Yeah, it was trapped and killed. Okay, so enough on aversive conditioning and habituation. It'll kind of circle back a little bit. Predator-prey. Who in this room ever had one of my technicians come to your door and ask if they can search for lion locations because something happened in their yard? So I would assume a few of you. We searched over close to 6,000 GPS locations or clusters of GPS locations looking to see what went on. So the idea was if you got a cluster of locations that occurred at night over a few days or maybe over one night, something's going on there. Maybe they killed something and that's what's keeping them there. So we went and searched countless numbers of these GPS locations, including single points, so we could get small prey items. We did a lot of this. We also looked at stable isotopes. So we actually knocked on people's doors to ask if we could pet their goats and cows and horses and stuff. So we could get hair samples from anything a lion could eat. And this was one of our grad students, who I think is at CU now. And we could figure out the carbon nitrogen signature for what is out there that could eat. And then we'd take samples from the lions and figure out, match that up and see what they ate. And this, along with one other urban study, we documented the highest proportion of non-ungulate, non-deer and elk prey in a lion's diet. Lions are supposed to eat deer and elk, right? Maybe sheep, but we don't like that. Farther north, moose, but not typically small prey items. So this is what we found. Males ate more native herbivores, so the deer and elk, than females. And when you're in low housing density to the left, they're eating more deer and elk. And as the human density increases, then they're eating more small prey items. On the order of 60%, 65% deer and elk, leaving 35, 40% of these small prey items. That's kind of interesting. This is what historically people have found. Most studies in really remote places are at this one, 95% ungulates. This was the Western Washington, another urban lion study that found very similar results to what we found. So risk versus reward. Why would I come into town to eat when I could get killed? So there's got to be some balance of I'm willing to go in there and put my life on the line because the reward is worth it. So let's dig through that one a little bit. We can figure out who's using these urban habitats. Is it the subadults? Is it the adult males? Adult females, kittens, what's going on? So cougars generally avoid the higher housing densities, but we also found that their success rate in hunting increases with housing density. That's pretty cool. So it's easier for them to hunt here. The other thing to mention is a female with kittens has huge, huge energetic demands. When a female's lactating, their energetic demands triple. So they need a lot to eat when they're trying to care for young. So here's the first interesting, wow, whoa, yeah, hang on. When are cats coming in using these higher housing density areas? So we can see here that there's some baseline level of what they do, but along about April, when the world's flashing, they start coming into these housing densities and using it more and more. And then in June, it drops off. We'll see if we can actually continue this story on what's going on, why they come in here and then they leave. Anybody have a guess yet? Why would they leave in June?
Kittens, the age of the kittens.
Tourists? People are saying the age of the kittens or tourists. I say it has nothing to do with the lion or kittens or people. Because lions will actually have kittens year-round. There's a pulse in the spring, summer, but they'll have kittens year-round. So, oh, they're following the prey, maybe. So we're hearing maybe the prey are leaving and going up higher, so the lions are leaving. Aha! Baby prey. That's when the fawns and calves are being born. And they're not being born in your neighborhoods. So maybe they're following them out there. Cool. Okay, males or females. So we see that females tend to use these higher housing densities more than the males. That's pretty cool. Age. Younger cougars are using, people get tired of me saying cougars, lions, cats, and everything else. I'm bad about going back and forth, but they're called a lot of things. So anyway, the young cougars are using higher housing densities more. We're about to lose it here. And as they get older, they tend to use it less. There could be a lot of different factors. Maybe they're learning and they don't like the risk in there, so they're staying out. Maybe these that really use it a lot are being removed. Maybe they get hit by cars and aren't in the population anymore, or maybe they are causing so many problems that they have to be taken out for management reasons. Wow. Let's just all look at my computer. So let's look at the blue first. This is how lions are responding to deer. Not much of an effect. Males and females both like deer. They like them no matter how old they get. They like them all year long. And they like them no matter what the housing density is.
They like deer.
Maybe I should talk really fast so we can get through this. Females avoid urban areas less than the males do. There's not really an age class effect. It seems like avoidance decreases during these middle months. So again, April, May, June, right in here. This is an interesting one. This is time since their last kill. So if they just ate, they tend to avoid urban areas. And after a few days, all of a sudden they're like, all right, it's worth it. I'm getting hungry. I'm going to town, right? So that was a pretty interesting effect. Small prey items. Okay, this is getting interesting. So we see that in January, they don't eat a lot of small prey items. And then come along April, May, this time of year. This is when they start moving into town too and using these higher density, housing density areas. Small prey items start picking up. So this is your raccoons, turkeys, skunks, unfortunately pets sometimes. It really peaks here, and then it tails off again in late summer to some baseline level. Let's look at non-ungulate items. So non-ungulate items are going to be small, right? So you can see these non-ungulate items peaking, and then June, boom, it crashes. They don't eat non-ungulate small prey anymore until later in the summer, and then they do that again. So what are they? They're eating a ton of small prey items, right? That's our calves, our fawns, our baby deer and elk right there. So that is what they're doing. That's when they're leaving town and they're going out and foraging on them. So that was pretty cool. It told us a lot about what they're doing in here. This one's pretty intuitive. As housing density is low, they're eating less non-ungulates. As housing density gets high, they're eating more non-ungulates. That's just prey availability. So let's look at how many they're killing each year. That number is pretty staggering. 84 kills a year. That's a lot. Per cat. Per cat, 84 kills a year. Generally, the rule of thumb is 1 deer a week. That's what I always read about, and that's probably about right.
Is there a prey size minimum for that graph, for that chart?
Yeah, I'm fading out, but getting there. So we can break this down into fawns, right? So they're eating a lot of that, close to, we can count them up here in a second. I think it's close to 30. I think 29 of that 84 is fawns. And then we got some calves. We've got the small prey items up here. And we've got the remaining, remember this part? That was like 20 deer, 26 deer, 25 deer, 26 deer, something like that. And then we've got 2 or 3 adult elk. That was this wedge over here. This is going to be.
Does that impact the moulder population?
What's that?
Does that impact the moulder population being fawns?
Nobody really knows that. The literature's kind of mixed on the impact of lion predation on deer and elk. Whether it's compensatory or additive, it's hard to say.
A couple of years ago, Coal Creek was having a problem with them taking a lot of domesticated dogs, in many cases right in front of the.
I remember that. That was right as we were kind of wrapping up our study. The comment was that Coal Creek was having issues with some lions taking a lot of dogs. That must have been, what, 5 or 6 years ago now, I think. We did have one male, and they were not in high-density housing. It was more remote, 5-10 acre ranches, and I don't think it was really up on the porch. That lion was actually killed by a hunter. Somebody called somebody with dogs, and they ran it and killed that lion. But yeah, there's some situations where lions will go in and start hammering dogs. Usually, I think most cases that I've heard of is where the dog's running out to a lion's kill and they're getting killed on that. So, it's a mixed bag of, are lions going after dogs specifically, or is it just, a dog's tendency is it smells something good out there, so it's running out there to see what smells good, and the lion happens to be sitting on it and it's going to defend its prey. So there's a mixed bag on those. So I think I actually covered this. They're showing that small portion of dogs that we did pick up. Here again, most of the fawns are in the 0 to 2 month old. 19.5 are June, July. Then it slows down, and then they go back to the adults. So let's see if I can. So we built this prediction model to actually model GPS clusters. The other thing that we recognize in here is scavenging. And when I started this study, people told me I could never catch a lion in a cage trap because they don't scavenge. We caught lions in a cage trap, right? You were there? We caught a lot of lions in cage traps, so they do scavenge. Over 14% of the large prey items were actually scavenging. When ranchers would have dumps, or if, the CDOT would have a dump where they'd take roadkills and put it, lions would scavenge off that. There was some evidence that lions were going after some CWD positive deer. We actually measured that for a while, and we're testing all the deer that lions were killing. It really didn't differ from the background prevalence rate at all. And then there was also these guys, black bears, taking a lot of kills from lions. So I'll circle back to that in a bit. But that can drive that 84, right? Other things are coming in, eating on it, and whatnot. So just to summarize our models, we'll keep this quick. If you have more female cougars, the kill rate goes up because they eat more. If you have more non-ungulates, the kill rate goes up because they're going to eat more of those because they're smaller. Looking at housing density, as housing density goes up, your non-ungulate kill rate's going to go up. As the age goes up, the non-ungulate kill rate goes up because the older ones don't eat as many non-ungulates. And in terms of females, the more you have, the greater the non-ungulate kill rate is going to be, because those females are the ones preying on that. Why? I saw this tendency of several of our lions. It could be down by lions. It could be outside of Boulder, outside of Golden. When they had kittens, they denned outside of town, and every night they would come down and pick off small prey, raccoons or whatnot. It was convenient. It was a reliable food source. So that's driving that non-ungulate kill rate. It's a good energy source, and when you've got 3 kittens or 4 kittens running around, you need it. In terms of mule deer, the non-ungulate portion, as that goes up, the deer kill rate's going to go down. As you've got more female cougars, the deer kill rate goes up, and there's no difference on that regarding age. So preliminary conclusions, housing density is a driver of this kill rate. It's determining a lot about the prey composition and how much they're eating. And some implications out of that. There's some implications just because it's those younger cats eating more of those non-ungulate prey, and as they get older, they're eating more of the deer and elk. Maybe there's some benefit to having that older age class out there. But then there's a key to educate people about what's going on out there. this low-density housing encroachment, and as we've got more and more higher density housing in there, we're introducing more and more small prey items, non-ungulates, and then we also have the pet issue out there, and we just need to take responsibility for that because they will get into them opportunistically, and so we need to be aware of that and help prevent that situation. Screaming in the woods. Anybody hear our screaming ever? You guys were all involved in this. We have to give credit to Kirsty over here who did her master's project and showed up. I should probably let her give this part of the talk. But everybody wanted to know how many cats are out there, and you guys remember, right? 43, see? You guys are all paying attention. So we wanted to figure out a way to actually sample cat populations. Historically, what everybody does is they go out there and mark them and put collars on them, and then you go out the next year and you try to catch them all again and do this mark recapture, statistical analysis, and you can come up with a number. It's really expensive. It takes a lot of time, and really catching a lot of cats is hard. So it really restricts the study area size. So most of these studies that have reported densities are 500 square kilometers. That's not very big. I don't think that gets us to lions from here. 1,000 square kilometers, maybe some of these studies. So we wanted to figure out a way to non-invasively sample lions over a larger area. Idea being it would be less expensive. It wouldn't disrupt the cats as much because we wouldn't have to go catch them and collar them and do all that stuff. We could distribute it over a bigger area and control the sampling frame. So let's see how that worked. This is all Kirsty's work here. The stuff at the end might be mine. So we had two parts of this equation. One, we had to detect a cat. We had to get it to come to some spot so then we could get an identifying mark off it, right? Puma concolor, right? It's the scientific name of the cat. Cat of one color. Well, we can't take a picture of it and identify it from the other cat. So that left us with trying to get hair or something off where we could get DNA, genotype of cat, and figure out a mark recapture again. We caught this cat here, and we got its genotype. We caught it again a week later. We can do a whole mark recapture, how detectable are the cats, and get a population estimate. That was our goal. So we read the literature and realized that people had tried this unsuccessfully. They put scents out, they put baits out, they put flashers out, and they'd leave those out for a year and they'd get 1 or 2 cats. Like, well, I'm not a genius, but I don't think I can estimate how many cats are out there if I see 2. This really hadn't been tried much, calls. We decided that we were going to really try calls, and we were going to put these rabbit in distress or a fawn in distress call out there in the woods and see if we could get these cats to come running to it. So this was Kirsty's work. The first year of this, she set up different, nice sampling design, you know, a bait only, a bait and a scent, a bait and a call, a bait, scent, and a call. And it kind of turned out that 21 of our 23 detections happened to occur when there was a call present. So we're like, okay, we're on to something here. They could care less about our baits. Half the time they'd stand on the bait cage to get the call. So the second year of her study, we actually had the Front Range study where we had a bunch of marked cats, and then Ken Logan was on the Compadre Plateau, and he had a bunch of marked cats. So she put a sampling, she sampled both areas. Oh, here's the time-lapse pictures of it. Here's a cat coming in, the call screaming inside there. You can see the barbed wire stretched across where you can snag hair, some sticky rollers that are supposed to snag hair. A cat goes in. Cat loves the camera. Very photogenic cats in the Front Range. He goes back in. Oh, what's he doing? Who left their phone on? That was me again, sorry. He's stealing the call. We lost a bunch of calls to these cats. So we're talking about a 165-pound big old male cat playing with a screaming call. And now the screen's off again. That's perfect. This one might be fixable. Okay. No, we saw this. Go away, cat. We don't want to see the video twice. So with these hair snags, she got approximately 60 samples, either on barbed wire or the sticky rollers. But what was interesting is of the 20 cats we had collared on the Front Range, she detected 19 of them. So that's pretty good. Remember, most of these other studies got 1 or 2. We got 95% of what we had collared, not to mention the uncollared ones. And on the UP, we got all 7 of the collared ones in that study area. So that was pretty good. Building on her success and some other things that I was doing, I figured we could use these calls to get population size. We could use this hair to get age structure, because I was messing with telomeres at the time, and that totally failed, so ignore that one. But we could use genetics to get its sex structure, and remember the stable isotopes, we could get diet composition with hair. So I'm like, this is really neat if we can get all this information by putting a call on a piece of barbed wire in the woods. So then we moved on. Kirsty graduated, and I took over and butchered it. But we wanted to estimate density, so I could come here and tell you guys 43. And I'm going to be embarrassed when it comes up as 42, but it might. So we structured this recapture, non-invasive sampling for 3 to 4 years. We set this grid from Lyons all the way to I-70. And as the data comes up, we ended up putting it in a markery site instead of a mark recapture, and I'll get to that. So here's our grid. Lyons is here, I-70 is down here. The Cougar Grid was 5 by 5 kilometers, and that's because that's about a quarter of a female's home range. A home range for a female is about 100 square kilometers. We also put this finer grid on it because I'm like, well, we're getting bobcats too, so why don't we estimate bobcat density at the same time? So that's what the clustered white grid is for. We built these cubbies. The first year we put these out, we noticed that lions didn't go in our cubby and duck under the wire. So I thought, well, maybe if we put the wires vertical, they'll squeeze between it. Plus, this way I didn't have the height issue with bobcats versus lions, because I could put it in a V, and the shorter bobcats that are skinnier could go through the bottom of the V and leave hair, and the taller lions had more room at the top so they could squeeze through and leave hair. That was the plan. How did it work? So this is what we got, 31, 68, and 74 pictures of bobcats through the 3 years, 86, 42, and 118 pictures of lions. I don't know why it was half that in the second year and then went way up in the third year. I have no idea why, because certainly the lion population did not change like that. These are the number of hair samples we got out of that, but successful genotypes was really poor. So we couldn't put this in the mark recite or mark recapture analysis because we didn't have enough unique identifications from the genotypes. So that's where I was lucky, because in year 2014, I had a bunch of collared cats out there, so we could actually use those in a mark recite. So I threw this into a mark recite analysis. We used 2-week intervals. We had 19 collared cougars available. 15 of the collared cougars were detected at least once on camera. So they came to these calls, and we detected them on camera. And then over the 6 time periods, this is the number of uncollared cougars we got. I was off. It wasn't even 42. I said 41, right? So we got an estimate out of this analysis of 41 cats with a 95% confidence interval ranging from 30 to 55. That gives us a density of 5.1 mountain lions per 100 square kilometers. Does anybody know the literature? How does that compare in the literature? Way high. Way high. So I think Montana's the only other place that's reported anything in the 5s. The typical's 3 to 4-ish. So maybe this is indicating we have a high density here. Yeah. But let's consider one other factor first, which I don't think the other studies do either. So comparing them across studies is difficult. These lions aren't necessarily on my sampling grid all the time. So I'm not necessarily, I don't really know the study area size. So we need to correct for the amount of time they're actually off the study area or outside of the grid and can't be sampled. So looking at the GPS data, we figured out that only 72% of the time they were actually in the study area, so the rest of the time they were outside. So we needed to correct that density estimate. So when we do that, we get 3.7 lions per 100 square kilometers, which brings us much closer to what's been published in the literature. Again, I I don't know that many of those other estimates are correcting for that. But that's more in the ballpark of probably a realistic estimate of what we've got in terms of lions in this area, which is a fair number of lions. And these are independent lions, not adults, but lions that aren't running around with their mother anymore. All right. One more little quick section and then I'll be done. We also started looking at kill sites, because remember when I started, I mentioned that article in the Daily Camera when I started the study of 7 lions together. We started noticing that we had a lot of different things on kills, including other lions. So we would see these GPS clusters build of a lion that made a kill. So that very first day after the kill, we'd go out and put a camera on it. And we'd document exactly what happened at that kill, why there was still something to eat. And we got all kinds of things: bobcats, skunks, fox, bear, other lions, coyotes, lots of birds. So we could document that. So we did document some sharing. So there's an adult with this one, but here it's an adult-sized juvenile kitten. So probably 10, 11 months old here. But on that same kill, we've got a 6-month-old kitten with her mother coming in. So there's 2 adult females with kittens that are coming in using this kill. We see coyotes come in, and then she finally loses it to this bear. So there's that paper that came out recently about this adaptive social strategies of solitary carnivores, that they're really not as solitary as we think. Maybe they're sharing kills so that if I share with you, next time I'm hungry, you'll share with me. I don't think our data is going to support that at all. I don't really buy it. Occasionally they share kills. A lot of times it's because they're related individuals. We had a really smart mom that liked to use Ohio Valley Ranch. She had a kitten. That kitten got big. The kitten left her, established her home range on the ranch as well. Kitten, well, she wasn't a kitten anymore. She was 2 years old. Mom was always a day behind her. She'd make a kill. Mom would show up the next day and eat off of it. So a lot of times this sharing was family groups. We look at our GPS data. They're not together very often. They do not spend a lot of time together. And then remember when we went through the mortalities at the beginning, we had 3 adult females killed by adult males. So much for social strategies and reciprocity. I think, it depends on the day and who's approaching it. Fighting another cat is a risky business. You probably want to avoid it most of the time. So if a cat comes in, it's a judgment call. Are they going to fight to save their kill? If it's a big male, are they going to leave it? Are they going to try to share it? And so it depends. And sometimes they share. A lot of times one lion will leave it, and other times a lion will end up getting killed. The other thing we saw in all of this, and I think I deleted the slide, were bears. So when bears were out, they came in on almost every kill and would take it. They would displace the lion. So I think 60% of kills during the summer were usurped by bears, which gets back to that whole point of what lions were eating during June and July when the bears are out, right? They switch to small prey in May. They go to the fawns June and July, maybe into August, and then they still have quite a few small prey items into August, September. Well, a lion could probably eat that small prey item before a bear could find it and take it from him. Purely speculation on my part, but that might be an explanation of why we're seeing lions switch to small prey items during that time. See, I keep hitting the laser pointer instead of the slide advance. So with that, I think I will fly out of here. That's all I got. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Matt. I just want to let folks know what will happen now. We do have a half an hour for question and answer. Since it's a limited time, we're going to really try and focus the questions to Matt on this research. If you have other questions, lion or other wildlife, I will stay after and make sure your question's answered or direct you to who can answer it. But at 8, our program's going to have to end, and by 8:30, we have to be kind of locked up and out. So I'll leave it to Matt.
So, you said that coyotes are chasing lions. I'm surprised that
They will. There was a cool video up right by Walker Ranch. It's Walker Ranch up top of Flagstaff, right? See, it's been a few years. My mind's gone. There was a really cool video that a lady took up there. A lion, and this lion had kittens, made a kill, and then there were 2 coyotes that harassed her, and I think she must have had 2 days worth of video of this, and finally that lion was just like, forget it, and left. So yeah, they will harass lions enough. Historically, when there were wolves, wolves would certainly chase them off, so there's probably a hangover from that. So no, one coyote probably won't. But then they'll also come in and scavenge on it while the lion's still using it, so they'll take some of that meat too. So that goes to that kill rate of 84 a year.
How long do the collars last, and how long does it take you to collar a cat?
Remind me to repeat questions. So the question was, how long do the collars last, and how long does it take us to actually collar a lion? So the collars, with 8 locations a day, they'd last roughly 2 years. So every 2 years, we'd have to go and find that cat and recollar it. And when I was starting, I thought this would be really easy because I'd have a GPS location and I could just go put the dogs out on it, chase it up a tree. Those were some of the worst hikes I've ever been on in my life, because you put them right on top of the cat and you end up going for the whole day over 6 mountains. And so sometimes it's really hard. I love to tell the story of AF01. She was a Boulder City open space cat. We caught her in Skunk Canyon, I mentioned that. We spent countless hours trying to catch her, months trying to catch her. We'd put a bait out and put a camera on it. She'd come in and feed on it. We'd throw the bait in the trap, and she would roll it down the hill. So we'd leave the door open and wire the door open and put the bait in front of it. She'd feed on it. And then the next night, we'd push it a little bit farther in. She'd stick her head in there and feed on it. We'd throw it in the back. She'd stick her head in and feed on it. And then I'd set the trigger on it, which was tying the string to the bait. She'd jump on the door and roll the trap down the hill. So very, very smart cat. So I literally think we had 2 months of baiting for her. And then her collar died. And one day we were on White Ranch down in Jefferson County and got on a cat track in the snow, treed this cat, and I look up and there's a collar on it. What cat's that? It was her. She just happened to go down there and we happened to get on her, so we got her recollared that way. And the next time we got another collar on her, I had her location next to the trail, and I actually snuck up on her and shot her with a dart. But she would never go back in a cage. So.
I guess I was hoping we could talk a little more about the chronic wasting disease that you saw in the kills for the cats in this study and the background prevalence. And it was like 10% for background prevalence and 25% for the kills for cats in the study. I think you mentioned that didn't seem statistically relevant because it seemed like so a layperson, it seemed like 2.5 times.
Right. So the question was about CWD and what we found in terms of lions selecting for CWD positive animals versus the background prevalence rate. So the figure up there of 25% came from Carolyn Crum's study, not from ours. So that's a published study that they actually found there was some selection for it. And I think the background prevalence rates are still right around that 10 or 15%, and we did not, I think we sampled 100 deer kills where we'd get there quick enough to take the lymph nodes out and actually sample them, and we did not see that there was any selection above what the background prevalence rates were. It looked like almost a tendency for that February, March time period where they seemed to select a few more of those. But nothing was significant on that.
Behind me, got one. Do you see any of the CWD going into the lions? Are they tracking?
The question was if we see any CWD going into lions. Not really part of our study, but I think 16, 17 years ago, our wildlife health lab got 3 kittens. The mother had been killed in Wyoming, and our wildlife health lab took these kittens in. And they have been actually studying that ever since. So they were feeding those lions pretty much a strict CWD positive diet, and they train these lions to do all kinds of stuff so they could look at cognitive abilities and stuff like that. And as far as I know, they haven't documented any effect of CWD in those lions. They haven't published it yet, and so don't quote me on that. Sir?
CWD a prion similar to the mad cow?
I think so. I'm not. It's chronic wasting disease, so very similar effects. So you'll see their ears droop, and they'll go in circles, and it'll kill them.
How many cougars died as a result of recapture hounds work?
We had no mortalities related to capture during our study. The question was how many cougars died related to using hounds to capture them.
How long do the kittens tend to stay with the mother?
The question was how long do the kittens stay with the mothers? I think the range in the literature is going to be somewhere between 12 to 30 months. We were seeing closer, right around 2 years old. Depending on when they were born, seemed to have a big effect on that because most of the dispersal of cats seemed to occur in April and May. And since those kittens could be born any time of year, it seemed like that April-May time period was as big a driver as age was.
Do they range farther and further away from each other, or do they come back together?
Yeah, as that kittens start getting to that dispersal, the question was the range of the kittens compared to the mother. And so as the kittens start getting to where they're ready to disperse, they'll start leaving the mother for a few days here and there. They'll start hunting by themselves and then sharing the kill. So it's not uncommon that the mom and the kittens will each make a kill in a night, and then they'll bounce back and forth feeding on it, and that'll slowly break up. And then you will see both females and the male kittens, they'll just leave. A lot of times, what we saw here where the females would make this big loop out, and then most of them would come back and settle in this area. We had a few that didn't. Most of the males would actually leave, and that's well documented in the literature that those males are hardwired to just disperse and get out of that area.
Matt,
Yeah.
what are the next big questions to be asked in the research, and will this be going on for a while? And as part of that, is there any research going on in response of, say, mule deer to adapt to a higher lion density in terms of their behavior?
So the front range studies actually concluded. It concluded 2 years ago, so we're not really continuing any of that. I think we've got a lot of the answers that we needed and some of the original objectives hammered out. I don't know of any studies that have been done looking at predation on mule deer in these urban environments and the impacts on that. There's a lot of variables to that. I don't know. I don't think any of the literature is very conclusive on that at this point. Yeah.
Study's done, but are you interested in getting any information from the public? Like if I get a cat on my camera and she's wearing ear tag R52, would you like to know when and where?
The question was, since the study's done, am I interested in getting additional information on these cats if somebody sees one in their yard or sees them on their trail cameras, especially one that's got an ear tag. I'm interested if it's got an ear tag on it just because it's fascinating to me to know that, hey, I caught it here and it's being seen here now and it's this many years and whatnot. It's interesting to me. And I think our DWM's, Kristen Cannon, I know, is always interested in that information. I think it's fascinating to all of us. So yeah, if you see an ear-tagged cat or a collared cat out there, we'd love to know about it. It's shoot us an email and let us know.
You know, in the mountain communities, there's a lot of anecdotal stories of dogs being killed, dogs disappearing with signs of a mountain lion trap or something. Does it not seem logical that the lions would be attracted to the dog barking, and that's why they're approaching the homes fairly often in the mountains?
I don't know that a lion would be attracted to a dog barking or not. I mean, they historically run from barking dogs. They're being chased by it. So I know when we run them with hounds, as soon as they, because we've got them on a signal on the hillside, as soon as they start hearing those dogs barking, even at half a mile away, they'll head the other way. And that's why some of those hound chases I mentioned have been really long. So I don't necessarily know that they're being attracted to the dog barking itself. You know, so.
One instance in Gold Hill where a lion jumped onto this a porch, and there was a small dog on the porch, and there was a little dog house out there. The lion went right in for it, and we tracked, and then it just ran off. Didn't get the little dog because the homeowner was home. It was winter time, and we tracked where the lion came from, and he had circled at least 2 other homes further down the mountain. You can see he circled each one, and then came up to where the incident happened. So it seemed like a real curious, or they're looking for that kind of prey around.
Right. So the question was about lions and their response to dogs encircling homes. I think part of it you hit there was curiosity. I think curiosity killed the cat, right? There was a picture in the Boulder paper, I think it was in the paper, of the cat that was nose to nose with the house cat with this glass door in between them a few years ago. So I think cats are very curious, and I think when they get in those situations, they are checking things out. And, you know, that again is the balance for our agency with what to do with those individuals and for the public of, you know, keeping their dogs up and keeping them safe. And yeah, unfortunately, those situations are going to occur from time to time. And that's when, you know, our law enforcement will jump in when there seems to be a pattern to that. But then there's the curiosity side too, and so I know there's times where they're looking in windows and being cats too. So it's a tough question to figure out, you know, what's going through the cat's mind and what that behavior really is at those times. That's where our law enforcement comes in, and they, you know, they've looked at a lot of them and they'll make those calls. There's hands everywhere.
I'm curious about the bobcat data that you collected. Is that the thing you're writing up?
The question was about the bobcat data. So we're actually going to use that. So since they are marked, have unique marks, we're hoping that we could actually identify them based on their marks as different individuals. So I've got a couple people trying to go through that data and put that mark Esight data together, and so we hopefully can get a bobcat estimate out of it. We'll see how it goes. It's a lot to go through that many pictures.
How are they sleeping? Why are they stepping on them? Where do they go in the daytime? I never see them in the daytime.
Sure. The question is, what are they doing during the daytime? Where are they sleeping? Kind of general behaviors. Generally speaking, I've seen a cat make a kill in the middle of the day. So they are up and active, looking at our GPS location. Sometimes they travel a lot during the day, but mostly they're traveling at night. They're up hunting, you know, at evening, dusk, or, you know, first thing in the morning, hunting at night. A lot of times during the day, especially if they have a kill, they'll go up on the hillside and find a sunny spot where they can kind of overlook and sit there, and they're close to their kill. They'll observe it. So they'll just day bed close to their kill. And even if they don't have a kill, they'll just kind of day bed up in the hills somewhere, rock outcroppings, things like that. And they're not very active during the day. I think hikers, especially on all of the trail systems, I don't think the cat even moves. I think 9 times out of 10, they're not on the trail, obviously, but if they're 30, 40 yards of the trail, I think the hikers go by them all day long and they hold tight. You know, we've certainly seen that with some of the GPS locations, where those cats, nobody sees them, nobody bothers them, and those cats, as long as they think they have good cover, they're going to hold tight. And we see that when we try to go in on them, in on their kills, or try to dart them or something like that. They hold really tight until they realize that their cover's blown. So you can get pretty close to them. Yes, ma'am?
What are their signs on the ground, though, for scat? That's cool.
The question was, what does their scat look like? They make a lot of scrapes too. Their scrapes will be directional, so you'll see where they've pulled piles of earth and stuff together, and they'll defecate in there or pee on it or whatnot. Their scat tends to be twisted, whereas a coyote's more elongated without the twists, and you'll see a lot of more twisting in a lion scat. Hair in it, of course, because they're eating deer. So that twisting is usually a pretty good indicator. And then you can tell their tracks apart from dog tracks. The most obvious thing is claw marks, since their claws pull in. A lot of times, I get people sending me pictures of the tracks all the time, and 9 times out of 10 you can see claw marks in them. And people just don't pick up on them because it's a big dog print out there or something like that. The other thing is those middle toes offset on a lion versus they're pretty parallel on a dog or any canid. So, yeah.
There are sort of stories about the young male being a problem with dogs. Did you address that at all, or are they the ones that are causing problems?
I guess it depends on what you define as a problem. And there's a lot to that. I mean, if you've got a problem cat, it's probably not going to make it past that young male stage, right? So we don't really know if they outgrow that and would be a not a problem adult, or would they always be a problem cat, just because they're not going to make it that long. Certainly, I think the young males, they do tend to turn up, but then they tend to move on too. So from what we've seen with the young male that comes into town, finds a family of raccoons and spends a week and a half hitting raccoons in somebody's yard, and then they a lot of times move off, they disperse. But they have a higher encounter rate too, because they are dispersing, so they're traveling a lot of country, moving, so they're encountering a lot of different things. So I don't know that there's a really good answer to, is it the young males that are the problem cats? Certainly there's a lot of cases where there's the young male that has caused a problem, but whether it continues or not, I think is debatable at this point. I don't think we have the data to really say, yes, indeed, it's the subadult males, and they're the ones that are going to cause all the problems. In the back?
Yeah, I was wondering what the practical implementation of your research looks like for the future, and by that I mean like what you do with it besides presenting interesting information.
So the question was, what is the practical implementation of the research? I think the guy right behind you is really interested in that too. My hope is that our managers can take this, and our developers, we can look at this and we can understand what is drawing cats into these areas. And I think we've got a lot of data sitting there now that's telling us they're coming in for these food resources. They're coming in for small prey items. A lot of times it's the females, which probably have increased energetic demands. So hopefully that can inform our management of why, and hopefully informs the public about why, and we can use that in future management on directing what we do and understanding the situation, and hopefully trying to figure out a way that we can actually live with lions in the landscape, so that we understand that we're going to have lions in here because we have a huge prey base in here. And if we don't want lions in some of these urban areas, we probably shouldn't have a huge prey base in these urban areas. Does that take habitat manipulation, or what does that take? But my hope is that we get a better understanding of how lions are using these areas, just so we understand, and if we want to make changes to change how they're coming in and using it, then then that's up to us and up to the public to do, I think. Yes, ma'am.
The lady here in the blue sweater has been wanting to ask you a question.
Okay.
You can't see her, I guess, it's a
Oh, like blue? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. If a lion stays in the same area for 6 or 7 days, does that mean it's made a kill, or is it just hanging out, or you don't know?
The question was, if a lion stays in the same area for 6 or 7 days, what does that mean? Does it mean it made a kill or something else, or do I not know? Generally speaking, it could be a few things. It could be a den. So they will den for a month or two when they just have kittens, and then after that they'll start moving their kittens around with them. Other than that, generally I would say it's probably because they've made a kill. And if they've killed, when they kill an elk, they won't necessarily stay on that for the entire time it takes them to eat it. A lot of times I've seen them, they eat on it for a few days, then they move off it for a day or two, and then they come back to it and they'll feed on it more. So the duration that they're on that elk is total like 2 weeks, but they've left it a few times during that. In other situations where I'm trying to catch them and I've got bait out, I can't think of any situation where I could keep a lion in the same spot for more than a few days. After a week or so, they tend to just need to move and check out the rest of their home ranges. I put those home range maps up showing just this big polygon of where they are. That's kind of the perimeter of the area they use, but they certainly aren't using all of that area in between. It seems like they've got hot spots within that they use this area, and then they'll move to another area and make a kill and use that area, and then they'll go back, and they kind of cycle through that roughly on a monthly time period, that they just cycle through these hot spots and use that home range. So, which gets back to a lot of the young cat issue and learning an environment. If a young cat moves in and finds a deer to eat in this location, it's probably going to come back and eat deer in that location and find deer over here. Versus if it finds a bighorn sheep herd when it's learning, it might focus on that bighorn sheep herd. So I think there's a lot to how lions learn their environment as they're building their home range and becoming adults. It's purely my speculation on how they do that, but I really see this repetitive behavior in where they travel and how they travel and the spots they return to. So I think there's a lot of learning that goes on as they learn those environments.
When you're coming into more urban areas, moving in on the riparian corridors, or the other landscape or habitat features that are tightly associated with certain areas, moving and not?
I mean, they're hunting where the prey is. So the question was, what landscape features are they keying in on when they're coming into these urban areas and hunting? So certainly they're going to use their riparian areas to move in, travel into these areas and hunt in, because that's where a lot of the prey is, and that's where a lot of the cover is that allows them to come in. So certainly those are areas that are being used quite a bit.
Any data on the chase to kill ratios, or it depends on how big they are and how old?
Yeah.
How many years do they actually?
The question was any data on the chase to kill ratio. I don't. It would be neat to have. I think they're pretty successful at it. But I don't have that data. They're putting accelerometers in our collars now, and I think in the future that's something we could probably get at, but we don't have that right now. The question was if the research is available on the internet for public access. Our annual reports are on the internet. It's under the mammals research page on the internet. And then publications are referenced on there. I think with copyright issues, we can't actually put the publication on our webpage, but the citation for it is, of all the published papers, is on there so people can find the papers that have been published on it.
What do you do if you encounter one?
Our DWM's out in the hall. She could come in and talk. Hi, Kristen. The question was, what do you do if you encounter one? You don't do what I do. The first thing is to remain calm. Don't scream. I went through how attractive our calls are when they sound like a dying rabbit or a dying deer. I guarantee anybody that screams in this room is probably going to sound about like that. So remain calm, look big. You've got a coat or whatever, pick your arms up, get in a group if you got people with you. Talk calmly to the cat and back away. If they attack, fight back. Did I miss anything? Okay. There's been plenty of records of the little old lady that fought off the cat that attacked her husband. Smaller people that can fight off a cat. They can be intimidated. There are other things out there that historically beat up cats, like bears. So that's something you can intimidate. So the other thing I would say on that is watch your kids. I think there's a difference between something that stands 3 feet or less and something that stands 5 feet tall. I've seen those differences in cat behavior. You could see that at the zoo probably if you went by cats with small kids versus taller individuals. They do respond to that shorter prey-like thing. So watch your kids, keep your kids close. If you're in cat country, then you got to be careful with respect to that, and don't just let them go blasting out in the yard by themselves.
With reports of rabbits, should we be concerned about rabid cats?
The question was, with reports of rabid skunks, should we be concerned with rabid cats? That's getting out of my realm. I would say it's certainly a possibility. In my research, we've had one mountain lion that died of plague. So they certainly could get it. I don't know, Mark, have we ever had any cases of a rabid? Just the skunks is the only thing. So I think that's the only cases I'm aware of. I got to go to a different part of the room.
Given what you learned, is there any policy changes you'd like to see in the future for wildlife management?
The question was, given what we've learned, are there any policy changes that I'd like to see or we're like to see? I'm going to say that's not my department. There's a lot of other people that make policies, so I want to provide the data. There's so much more going on to that equation than just me going out there and learning a bunch of stuff. There's a large portion of our agency that's dealing with the human safety side of things, and that when you're dealing with a big predator like this, that's got to weigh in pretty heavy. So those policies changes are made way over my head.
Would you give us a little narrative for the final photo where we have an airborne cougar? What was happening there?
Somebody wants a narrative for the final photo. I just see a blank screen.
I see a blank screen.
So the final picture was this airborne cat. It's pretty cool what you can pick up on a trail camera. So that was one of the trail cameras we put out. That cat had killed an elk. I'm pretty sure it was an elk in there. And then we put trail cameras on it to see what was going on. The picture before that one is the cat taking off, and there's a magpie flying off. So that magpie had come in on that kill, and the cat did not like the magpie. So it was literally jumping through the air after a magpie. So. Question?
Is there any correlation that you're aware of anybody is working on between climate change, prey behavior, and predator behavior?
The question was if there's any relation between climate change, prey behavior, and predator behavior. I'm not aware of any work on that. My guess is Colorado is not a great system to look at some of the climate change stuff because our prey is doing really well and our predators are doing really well. My general comment on lions is where there's deer, there's lions. I think that bears out historically. That first slide I put up showed that the geographic range of lions was, other than humans, the largest geographic historical range of any mammal in North America. So that pretty much would indicate that lions are very adaptable. And so where there's prey, I think they're going to be able to do pretty well. So I would guess lions are probably not a good species to look at any of those climate change questions with. Yes, ma'am. The question was if the growth of the moose population has affected the lions. Not that I know of. There's no research out there to suggest that. You know, lions do kill moose. During my study, there was one lion that moved up by Crown Point, which is up the Poudre Canyon, and it did kill a moose up there. You look at some of the Canada work, and moose are pretty prevalent in their diets up there. So yeah, I mean, we're talking a 100-pound female, 180-pound male that can kill something that big. So they're a very, very powerful, efficient predator. But we certainly don't have the data in the state to say that our changing moose populations has affected the lion population at all. They tend to, given their social structure and stuff, they tend to regulate themselves a lot too. In the back. The question was again about policy and suggesting that now that we know that lions don't habituate to livestock, if that's going to change CPW policy on how we treat lions that have killed livestock. Again, I'm going to dodge the policy question, and I'm not going to comment on that. I don't know that, I would say the lions in my study didn't habituate. I'm not going to say that no lion habituates to livestock. I'm sure there's some out there. And that whole livestock predator issue is way beyond me or the scope of what I'll discuss here. Last question, who's got a good one? Go ahead.
Really quick, if there's a high bear density, does that tend to deter the lions being prevalent in that area?
The question was if there's a high bear density, does that tend to deter the lions from being in the area? I don't think there's been any research done on that. Again, knowing what the lion density is, knowing what a bear density is, there's very few cases where anybody knows that. Certainly, the bears are having an effect. It could have a big effect on their predation rates. And it may affect movement patterns of the lions. I don't know that it would have a population level response on lions. And I think that's it.